everybody, welcome back. I initially wanted to start with the mindset piece, but I may lose some of you if I do that. So let's start with strategy instead. Just be aware that mindset really does affect what you are able to see and absorb. That's not just an airy-fairy personal development thing. There is a thing called an RAS in your brain that literally determines what you can perceive, because if you'd perceive everything, you'd go nuts. So just keep an open mind for now. Also, the IBM study from 2008 showed that between 70 to 80% of changes fail, but the organizations that are good at change have an 80% higher success rate, mostly contributable to mindset, corporate culture, senior management support, and inner attitude to the complexity of change, which is all at some level psychology and communication. But still, let's go into the strategy bit first. Now, why would you need strategies from us? Aren't you already good at change? Well, perhaps you are, but maybe some of the people that you want or need to influence aren't, maybe inside your organization or outside the organization. We don't tend to analyze what we are really good at. We just do it. So it's sometimes a little bit hard to see why other people aren't getting the point. So I'll get a bit more to that at the end. So the usual format for an intro video like this, rather than the entire course, which would be something that we would deliver tailored to your organization, is to give 3 things to consider in the relevant change, and I will stick with that format too. So the 3 things I'd like to talk about quickly today to give you a taste of what we can offer is types of organization, change management theories, and communication strategies. Obviously, we cannot cover all of these in detail in a short talk like this, but we can give you a short idea of what we are looking for and what we would be able to offer. So communication strategies first, because even if you don't watch all of this video, I'd really like you to hear this, especially if you're someone who is already on board with the need to protect nature and the environment, because we see the same mistake all the time by really well-meaning people, and it's really hurting the cause we all care about. And that might not be you, but it might be somebody you know. Essentially, communication is a way of reaching another person, building a bridge to the other person, which means you need to talk about things that they care about first, in order to get them to care about what you care about. That applies especially if you're trying to influence someone outside your organization, say politicians or another organization or the general public. But it also applies to reaching people in your own organization. Marketers are exceedingly good at this. That's how they get you to buy stuff that you don't really need. But scientists and environmentalists seldom study marketing because it's not really something we like. And we oftentimes see it as manipulative. After all, if you give the facts, intelligent people should listen, right? And yet, if you want to make an impact, make a difference in this world, you really need to get good at marketing, because studies show that most people don't buy a product or your research or your opinion because of rational arguments, but because of emotions. They may justify their emotions with rational arguments, but you have to reach their emotions first. Otherwise, they nod their head and then do nothing, right? The other day, I had an online discussion with some scientists where I may not have been very kind, who were lamenting that they were now supposed to find the economic value of nature, but they are scientists and it's impossible, and boo-hoo! And, you know, the whole world goes to hell, basically. And then I actually looked at what they published, and I had to read through pages and pages of theses and proofs and scientific data until I finally got to a useful conclusion that someone in finance may be able to use. And then they wonder why a CEO who doesn't listen to his own people if they don't get to the point in 20 seconds doesn't listen to them. Guys, you don't have to become economists to reach people in finance. They're much better at that than you will ever be. You just have to adjust your communication, and they will find the monetary value in nature, or certainly the risks of its destructive potential, or not having the resources anymore. The traditional form of scientific papers is nice. I learned to write them too, believe it or not. But if you want to make a difference in this world, put the results that are really interesting to the people that you want to reach first, along with some very conclusive data, so that a layman would understand it and would understand it in the 20 seconds or so that you have to reach them, without using all the old platitudes that everything is going to hell in a handbasket, but pointing out something that is new and different to them. And then you can go into all the details. It doesn't matter if you're not interested in money. They are. It doesn't matter that you know that there are much bigger values than that. They don't care. Talk to them in their language, not in yours. So what is more important to you? That people see you as smart or evolved? Or that you have an actual impact and protect those who can't protect themselves? If it's the latter, you'll have to learn to communicate effectively to help them, or at least make an effort to do so. So how could you do this? I quite often get asked for win-win examples with nature by people who clearly don't expect all too much. Either they are environmentalists who have long given up trying to reach those in power and with deep pockets, or they are people with deep pockets who have never focused on win-win situations and therefore don't see them. Remember how I talked about the RAS in the beginning? We'll get to that a little bit more in the mindset piece. But for now, here's an example of how someone in the environmental space managed to get through to a profitable business. I was on a finance conference the other day about water. Yep, about water. There are voluntary water disclosure reports now, and some of the biggest companies in the world are now doing these disclosures. Turns out that Coca-Cola disclosed in their water report in 2022 that their risk of water shortages is $250 million, they said on that conference. Well, I looked into the report myself. It is available on the internet for free and publicly on the Coca-Cola website, and I actually posted it on LinkedIn. I saw not just $250 million, I saw $1 billion. I also saw a huge amount of what they can save in terms of risk and in terms of expenditure if they do certain things that are good for the environment. Now, that got their attention. It doesn't matter if they're really conservationists or not. It is about profit for them. The comparable Japanese beverage company, on the other hand, that was there, had taken care of a large amount of their risk already by starting to buy nature reserves and woodlands 20 years ago to protect the soil and thereby the water they need. Which of the two do you think looked for win-win situations with nature? So why did Coca-Cola not do this? Well, I'm sure it's not because Coca-Cola's executives were less smart. They aren't stupid now because they have seen and are measuring the risk, and they are actively taking countermeasures. They are actually listed as one of the most sustainability-focused companies on the CPD index. But the executives obviously didn't look at the big enough picture 20 years ago. They looked at humans only. They didn't look at how all life on this planet hangs together and supports each other. They didn't understand that if you exploit nature, you eventually exploit yourself. The Japanese did. That's why they are now the smarter ones. What do you want people to say about you in 20 years? What do you think the executives of big companies want people to say about them in 20 years? Now, that might be an extreme example, and I don't teach marketing. There are much better people to do this, but this is an example of how reaching people who are interested primarily in money and significance through something that is important to you. The avoidance of soil erosion, the preservation of woodlands and the creatures in it, and the preservation of clean groundwater. And none of it is manipulation, because while you really care about the latter and not their profit, the numbers are very real. So you have found a way to make a win for yourself, a win for the other person as well. You just look at a different aspect of the same situation. It's like having a globe, and you're looking at it from one side and care about these bits, while they look at the globe from the other side and maybe only or maybe primarily care about those bits, but it's the same globe. If you want to save all bits, you have to save the whole globe. There's nothing manipulative about that. You're not lying. You're just showing how the different bits are connected through the globe, which is the absolute truth. So if you want to see examples of how this is done well, take a look at the posts at the World Economic Forum. Yep, that's the very forum that we used to perceive as the arch enemy of the environmental movement, and they now found win-win situations long before a lot of environmental organizations have. And they regularly publish different stories about how environmentally friendly practices have led to an improvement both of humans and nature, as well as a healthy profit or a potentially healthy profit in many cases. X Prize and Singularity University, both not primarily concerned with the environment, but rather with tech and with business, have also found these win-win situations. And X Prize is certainly good at raising funds for these efforts. So take a look at their marketing, the fundraising, the influencing, both inside their own organizations and outside. The primary difference that I see is that while they will point out certain tragedies and risks, they will focus more of their effort on finding a solution. And that's exactly what they do in other areas of business as well, because they know that if you keep focusing on a problem and how bad it all is, you have a tendency to manifest it and make it worse. That's not airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. That is an actual fact. What you give energy to has a tendency to become reality. So if you focus on the problem, that's what you will get. And others will only focus on the problem as well, and at least some of them could find a solution if they looked in the other direction, towards the solution, not the problem. And very powerful people know that. And they use this principle all the time. We'll get to that more in the mindset piece. Plus, if you focus on tragedy, at some point the people who could make a difference will stop to listen, because they don't want to constantly feel bad, because that saps their energy and they know that. So take a look at how the economic organizations phrase things, and you may be able to get a better result in your communications as well, if you're currently not reaching the people you want to reach. Now, types of organizations. Now, this is a piece that will influence how you communicate as well, both within your organization as well as if you want to influence another organization. Every one of these organizations will function in a slightly different way, and leadership and influence need to be approached slightly in different ways as well. This is, by the way, it doesn't come from me, but this is change management theory out there, which can be found in very many different places. So one of the most common approaches I see is using metaphors, and these 8 metaphors of machine, organism, brain, cultural system, political system, psychic prison, instruments of domination, and flux and transformation. And depending on what kind of a system you have in front of you, it will depend on the methodology that I use to influence people, right? Like the machine, for example, I'm not going to go through all of these. We can go through these in your organization if you need to know a little bit more about this, because maybe you want to influence different types of organizations and you need to know how to do this. So, but just to give you a little bit of a taste, a machine, for example, is the traditional organization that we all know, at least those of us who are a little bit older. It's top down, it's hierarchy. People at the top might make the decision, and those instructions are followed by the people below. The problem sometimes is that people below don't understand those instructions really well and don't implement them well. People are interchangeable. So if you influence someone, you have to influence someone at the top, right? If you take a look at a brain, on the other hand, it functions very differently, because a brain organization is just like a normal brain, designed to process information and learn over time. And the organization values the collective intelligence and organized wisdom of the organization. That means commands don't necessarily come from the top down, but people learn from each other, and there are feedback loops. If you have an AI company, you may also have a brain, for example, because an AI is really an external brain, right? And as much as it learns, the organization has to adapt. Then there are cultural systems. Cultural systems, I think those 3 are probably the most important ones for us right now. Cultural systems are basically mini societies with subcultures and cultures and defined values, norms and beliefs and rituals. Some churches fall under this, but also some charities, obviously. And that will affect how effective sometimes this organization can be, because a machine, for example, if it's only interested in profit, will fire its people if they are not effective enough. An organization like a charity that is there to help people will not be able to do that to its own people, because otherwise there will be a conflict in values, because people are expected to treat others the same way that they treat them inside, right? Which will sometimes mean that some people who are not effective will be kept in the organization and people will find a place for them, but then there's a problem with the efficiency on the outside. So it also means that it is sometimes a little bit more difficult to influence an organization like that, because they're very much influenced by cultural norms. And if you don't comply with these cultural norms, you don't belong in the organization, and they will get, they will not hire people who don't comply with these norms. And if there are things on the outside of the organization that don't fit the cultural norm, it's just being ignored. So you need to, if you want to take a look at an organization like that or at a structure like that, you have to understand the culture first and understand where you can put the lever in order to get the culture to move. Now, some of the other ones, political systems, sometimes you can find them in machines as well. Psychic prisons, a machine can turn into a psychic prison if it's led by fear, for example. Instruments of domination, well, that's an organization. A lot of environmentalists think that all profit-orientated companies are instruments of domination, because an instrument of domination imposes its will on others and exploits resources for financial gain. But I think that is a danger. And it's a mistake to look at every profit-oriented organization that way, because that way you also shut down any possibility for you to find win-win situations with them, which may well be there, and they may well be interested in because of new regulations, for example. Flux and transformation is not really something that I have seen before, but some people may find or may interpret their own organization as a flux and transformation organization if they are very static people, very interested in certainty and into things not changing, and they have a problem adapting. If you have too many people in the organization like that, it may destabilize the organization when the organization actually has to change because of external influences. They may sabotage the change as well, but it may also be that a case that some of the leaders, or if there's only one leader, doesn't have the consistency needed to lead, because sometimes they make changes too fast when things don't immediately work, and then change something else again and don't really realize what they're doing to other departments, that their tiny little change has a massive impact on other departments. So you have to take a look at this as well. Depending on the organization, obviously, the change will be different, whether you want to make the change inside or whether you want to change another organization outside. Now, the third bit was change management theory, and that's another interesting bit. And these theories tend to combine the different communication types and organization types and cultures and so on and so forth. And there are some really interesting bits in there. So I've got a few examples here: the change curve, Lewin's model, Bacart-Harris model, Lewis-Diamond, McKinsey model, the Burke-Litwin model, the SIPOC diagram, and how you communicate with stakeholders. There are all kinds of different theories, and we can go into them depending on what kind of organization you have, what kind of type of change you prefer, whether you need a more agile method or you want a more structured approach like Prince2, for example. But there's one very interesting change theory. Well, it's not really change theory bit. It's I got this from a book course, believe it or not. But it describes very interestingly how most changes in big corporations work. Take a look. I thought it was really funny. So, is it working? Yes. Don't mess with it. No problem. Oh, that's pretty easy one, right? Is it working? No. Did you mess with it? Yes. You idiot. Does anyone else know? No. Hide it. No problem. Does anyone else know? Yes. You're screwed. Can you blame someone else? Yes. No problem. No. You're screwed. Did you mess with it? No. Will it blow up in your face? Yes. You're screwed. Will it blow up in your face? No. Look the other way. No problem. Isn't that really how it works in big organizations, at least? I mean, I've seen this so many times. I think this is it has a few swear words in it, but you know what? If you listen to me, you will have to live with them at some point. It's really about the content, and sometimes you really have to say them in order to get through to people, otherwise people just fall asleep. So actual theories that I actually talked about in different scenarios. I personally really like Kotter's model, as it also has a nice fitting story that speaks directly to my heart about this little penguin whose iceberg is melting. It's a great children's story, by the way. At the same time, it changes about change dynamics, and it basically what happens in a very, very short, it's a little book that you can buy online. Very, very short. There's this penguin, and it just goes somewhere, and then it sees the iceberg is melting, and there's a real danger there. And he comes back and tells all his people about it, and they say, "Oh well, you're just imagining things, right?" And he keeps on going, and then he gets buy-in by certain people, and in the end, he actually gets the whole tribe to move. But it takes quite a bit, and all these different stages in Kotter's model are explained in this children's story about how he's doing this. It's a really interesting way of bringing change management to people, and that's why I like it. It also really works in my experience. So the methodology generally will depend on your organization and the exchange of the rate of exchange, or the extent of the exchange that you will make. But some things will always come up. Now, to get back to the question of why you want to ask to offer a course in your organization about change, especially if you're good at change yourself. Well, you may be a large organization with lots of experience in change, or a small organization that is great in change but wants to influence other organizations that aren't. The point is, while you may know a lot about change, you may have other things to do than to teach it. And there are maybe some people in your organization that may benefit from hearing about it, or outside the organization. That's where we come in. So why us? Why not any one of the other coaches out there? There are quite a few of them. Well, there's this story about FedEx, right? I don't know if it's true. I just heard it from Dean Graziosi, who also heard it from somebody else and didn't know if it was true. But it's a nice story to illustrate the point. So there was this machine that broke down in FedEx National Sorting Center in the USA. And it's the sorting center that is basically the main center for sending stuff into the world, and it would just not work. And it would have been a complete disaster if that machine had broken down for a long period of time. So they asked this technician to come in to fix the machine. And the technician takes a look at the machine, and he turns one screw for a quarter of a revolution, and suddenly the machine works again. So the manager or CEO, whoever, comes to him and says, "Okay, I want the bill. How much do we owe you?" And the technician tells him $10,000. So he just adjusted one screw, right? So the manager or CEO says, "Okay, can I please have an itemized bill?" So the technician takes a piece of paper, writes an itemized bill, and hands it to him. The manager looks at it, goes up into the office, and writes a check. The technician leaves. So his employees ask afterwards, "What was on that bill?" It says, "Turning the screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $9,999. And that's kind of what we want to say here, because you've got a lot of different coaches out there who are very good at explaining how mindset works, right? They're exceedingly good at certain change management theories. But you know what? Most of the stuff that will come up in a change that's really problematic will not be the stuff that you will see in books. You really need somebody who has been in an organization and has seen different types of changes, and has seen what has gone wrong, and maybe learned from some of the things that they didn't understand at the time. And this is what we can provide, because we have done changes and worked on change projects and been very successful in them in very large organizations and very large, powerful organizations. So if you want somebody with experience to teach you this, it may well be worth it if you take somebody who has done this before, who can actually answer the questions that are coming that are a little bit left field, so to speak. So this is what we can offer. And we are offering that we're coming into your organization. We can have a little talk first, and we can have a little, and then if you are really interested, or if your departments are interested, we can have a chat about what exactly you want us to provide. What else we offer is in the next 2 or 3 videos. It's basically the main pieces are the mindset piece, which is really important. I kind of touched on it a little bit in the last few portions, but there's quite a bit more to it, limiting beliefs and so on and so forth. And then there's also going to be a bit about all these different things that I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, which I partly put out in LinkedIn and partly on other platforms, of all these different win-win situations other people have seen. And that's simply to show you and kind of get your brain going, get your creativity going, to see, okay, these things are possible. And the reason why I think it's really helpful is, A, it was really helpful to me. I'm more or less a conservationist who became a banker at some point simply to protect her pets. And I worked in some of the biggest investment banks in the world. But I didn't see those, and I was interested in it, but I didn't see it. And then I moved back to where I was originally not born, but raised for quite a considerable amount of time. And the people around here seem to think that conservationism is basically about recycling trash. And that's all they think about. That's all they think about when it comes to win-win situations with the environment, which isn't, it is a win-win situation for the recycling company because they make money with it, but it's not really what we're about. So I think seeing a few examples and just seeing what's possible is just really interesting. That is something that we would show as well. So I hope to see you soon. I hope to hear from you soon. Our contact details are at the end of this video, but also at the end of the other videos. It's also on the website www.novell.co.uk, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.